Welcome back to Blue Collar Coder. I'm Jack Harrington, and today we're going to look at everybody's favorite topic, and that's forms management on the web. Yeah, I know. It's not. I get it. Forms are a pain in the butt. So let's see if we can make it better by using a form manager like Formik or Final Form. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a very simple form. It's a pizza ordering form. It's got your name. It's got your phone number. It's got the type of pizza that you want. And we're going to build it three ways. The first way that we're going to build it is with off-the-shelf React. We're not going to use any forms manager at all. And we're going to see how that plays out. And then we're going to re-implement it using Formik and then Final Form. And the reason that we're going to do that is we want to understand the value of a forms manager. Now, when you think about it for a second, a form actually has two different concerns. The first is the mechanics of the form. What fields are currently valid? What fields have been touched? Is the whole form valid, right? That's the mechanics of the form, handling focus, handling blur, all of that. The second concern is the business value of the form. What are we trying to get? Are we trying to get your name? Are we trying to get your phone number? What validations we want to apply to those? In our first example, where we build it with just basic React, those two concerns are going to be intermixed together, right? In fact, in the state, we're going to have both the data that we want and also the validations. Not great. What a form manager allows you to do is actually tease those concerns apart, which has a lot of value. It does mean that, for example, your forms are going to be more consistent across the site, and you're going to be able to focus on the business value as a front-end developer as opposed to, kind of managing all the little bugs that come with all the state management and all the rest of it. Okay, so at the end of the video, I'm going to tell you which one I would choose and also give you a bunch of different architectural options that you can build on top of a form manager. So without further ado, let's jump in and build our first version of our pizza form in basic React. So we're starting off with a directory that has a pizzas directory in it, and within that are a bunch of transparent PNGs for the different pizzas. So we're just going to use those to kind of show the pizza that you're going to get. Make it nice, make it pretty. So let's use create React app to create a new project called use state example. This is just going to be vanilla React. We're going to copy in the pizzas and bring a VS Code and add material UI. First thing I'm going to do is just take out the initial contents and then bring in a bunch of the material UI classes that we're going to use. But we're going to walk through this step by step, so don't worry about that. All right, now we're going to go container, and that's a material UI container, just sets up the page, and the CSS baseline that gives us our basic fonts. And we'll put in a nice little H4. Your best pies are always at Fry's Pizza. Okay, now let's use reducer in this case. So we're not going to use state. We're just going to use reducer. And that's I just want to kind of show in a complex system, you're probably going to want to have some more intricate state management. The first thing it takes is a reducer, which takes a state and action. It's a function. And it returns the new state where the action's been applied to it, just like your Redux store. And then the second value of use reducer is the initial state. So I'm just going to give it name, Jack. So we're going to have a text field with a label, your name, with a value state.name, because it's coming from the state. And then when we get an on change, we're going to call that state reducer that we got back from use reducer. We're going to dispatch to that, basically. And we're going to give it a payload and a name. And it's going to basically just merge the payload and the name together. So next we're going to make it pretty. We're going to make it full width, and then we're going to put a little margin on the top just to move it away from the heading tag above it. Now in this case with material UI, you do this make styles thing. That gives you back a function called use styles that you then use inside of the function, the class. All right, looking pretty good. Nice little separation there. So the next thing we're going to do is create a validate function. And this is going to take the state. It's going to run some validations against it, first just on name. And then it's going to return a new state with those validations as well as an overall valid. So you can have valid name, which is going to tell you if the name is valid, and then valid, which is going to tell you if the whole form is valid. So now let's go and add that error to the text field. So we can see if I remove the name, I get an error. If I don't, it's fine. All right, so let's go and add the phone and then validate it with a pretty ready regex. And now we'll have a new action called set phone. Just make the appropriate changes to text field. And now we can go in there. And now that looks pretty good. As long as you got 3 numbers, dash, 3 numbers, dash, 4 numbers, you're good. Okay, now we have to have a way to submit our pizza for baking.
Where's the pizza?
That's right, exactly. Where's the pizza? Okay, and now, last thing, we actually have to select what pizza that is. So I'm bringing in a grid, and this is going to have a 3-column left-hand panel and a 9-column right-hand panel out of total 12 columns. It's going to give us a nice, like, 1/4 or 3/4 look. The pizza is going to go on the 3/4 side on the right, and then the buttons are going to go on the 1/4 side on the left. Now I'm just going to paste in this pizza types. It's basically just an array of objects where it's got a regular name, text name for it, like Alfredo pizza, and then the image. And that maps to the pizzas in the public directory. So the first thing we're going to do, you're going to actually store the pizza object in the state as the currently selected pizza. And then we're going to show that. And make sure the pizza is a responsive image, means it's 100% width. That looks great. Nice pepperoni pizza. And then we're going to create a radio group. It has the name of pizza and then the value of the current pizza. Then we're going to go and add in the on change, which needs to call the reducer with a set pizza, which I haven't made yet, with the current pizza. We'll just use that find method again on array. Very, very nice. So now go and make the set pizza. Now, obviously, all of those actions are the same, essentially. They just go and set the value, but if you had more elaborate logic, you could put it in there. And finally, we need to create the form control labels that have the radios with the different pizza types. Looking pretty good. Let's change it. Looks great. But do we really know the data is good? Let's put a little JSON stringify div down there just to make sure. It looks pretty good. All right. We've got our first pizza form ready to go. But as we'll see in other examples, we probably didn't hit all the edge cases that we needed. This is a fairly simplistic implementation. Okay, well, that wasn't so bad, but 1, it's a simple form, and 2, you can see that those 2 concerns, the mechanics of the form and the business value of the form, are intermixed in the system. So let's go and see if we can use a form manager like Formik to let it handle the mechanics while we focus on the business value of this really important pizza ordering form. All right, on to Formik. Let's go create a Formik example directory. Make it a create React app again. And now we're going to add Formik as well as Material UI Core. And it's looking pretty good. So let's bring in most of the top from our initial React implementation. It would be the pizza types as well as the styling and the Material UI imports. So I'm just going to create our container as well as our CSS baseline. And then we're going to bring in Formik. That's going to bring us in a Formik component. We can then put in here. So we set up the initial values. This is going to be our state. So in this case, we're just going to use pizza as the name for the pizza. And we're going to give it a validation function that takes the values and assembles an object of errors. So the first thing we'll look at is that state.name, see if it's got actual text in it. As well as the validity of the phone number. And we just need to change state to values and then return the errors. Now, Formik itself takes a function as its contents. And that function gets a bunch of different things. It gets values, which is the current values, errors, the current errors, touched, which is something we didn't do in the use state example. And that tells you whether user has even visited a field yet. You don't want to put an error on a field that the user hasn't yet even touched. So that's why you have touched, and that lets you know all of the fields that the user has actually engaged with. I kind of cheated in the use state example because we started off with values. Normally you don't start with values. So if you just did all of the requirements on a field right away without going through that touch step, then you would invalidate. You say everything is an error until it's not an error, which is not a friendly experience. You don't want that. All right, we also got handle change, handle blur, handle submit, and then set field value. So then we create a form tag that has that handle submit. And we bring in our text field. We're going to bring it in from our React example. We need to make some changes. We need to set the error to errors.name and touch.name. Again, you want to make sure that you have both an error and that the user was able to touch it first. Then we need to reset state, and we no longer have any reducer or anything we need to call there. So we just pass off on change to handle change. Formik is going to handle that for us, which is really cool. And we also use on blur with handle blur. Now blur happens when you leave a field. Focus is when you go on to a field. We also have to set the type and the name. And we also have to put in the classes. Now let's take a look. Okay, looking pretty good. So let's go and bring in the second text field, the phone. Pretty much the same changes for this. Again, you no longer have to handle all the data management, right? You don't have to do your own reducer or set state, whatever. And it's handling all the validations and it's looking really pretty. So let's bring in that button.
Where's the pizza?
Absolutely. That's what I say every time I go to a 4-year-old's birthday party. All right, we need to now bring in our grid. All right, first thing we need to do, again, we got values. In this case, it's got values.pizza, not values.pizza name. So now instead of handle change, because it really doesn't know how to handle radio groups in particular, or maybe it does, but I couldn't figure out a way right off the bat. I'm just going to use that set field value that came in, and that's kind of the manual override. So I'm going to say set the field value to the name that we find on the pizza. Tweak a few more states. Because we only have the name of the pizza, we need to go get that object again and set the source to that image URL. Oh, and it looks like I didn't actually bring in the pizzas, so let's go do that. All right, looking pretty good.
All right, well, that was awesome. I really like Formik. But let's also take a look at another one. Let's take a look at final form.
Is that like a Pokemon thing? The final form? All right, again, a create React app. So we're going to bring in React final form as well as material UI. Again, bring in most of the preamble with the different material UI components and the styles and the pizzas. Now we're going to bring in the form and field components from React final form. And then we're going to set up our base of our template with your best buys are always a fries pizza. So let's set up the form with the initial values and the on submit. Obviously for on submit, you do something more than just do nothing with it. And in this case, form, as opposed to taking a function as a child, it takes render as a property. Same kind of idea though. In this case, we've got handle submit, values, and valid. Handle submit is for the form tag. Values is the current list of values as an object. And then valid is the overall form validity. Okay, let's create some helper functions. In this case, we're going to have required, which does the same thing as before. Just checks if the field is required. Just checks if the field has some text. And then validate phone, which is going to validate our phone value. So let's create a field. So in this case, with React final form, a field has a name and then a validate function. And then it takes a child function, which has an input and a meta. And that input object is what you can spread into any input component, and it's going to have on change and a bunch of other stuff that's going to manage that input for you. And then meta has things like whether the field is in an error state or it's been touched, all that. All right, let's bring in our submit button.
Where's the pizza?
Oh yeah, I totally agree. So now we need to bring in final form. Looks like we forgot that. And yeah, great. Okay, so we've got our first field going. Let's create our second field for the phone. Pretty much exactly the same thing. And now it looks like we're getting close to it. Let's go bring in that grid again. All right, so a little bit of issue with this one. I did have to go and do a lot of research to figure out exactly how to do this. So here's a way I was able to find on the great Google machine. So radio form field. And this is basically going to kind of wrap one of our material UI elements in the API surface that React Final Form wants. So now we're going to go and iterate through that through our pizza types and set that form control and then give it a React Final Form field with a component of radio form field. So wow, a lot of stuff going on there. Feel free to go and grab the code and experiment with it yourself. Okay. Looks like it's doing pretty good. Nice. So a fairly similar experience, I would say, to Formik. All right, not bad. Nice way to be able to build forms.
Okay, well, I hope this is giving you a lot to think about. There's certainly a lot of good options here. If it were me, if it were somebody asked me, just give me a snap decision, I would probably go with Formik. It's very popular, and I do like the API surface just a touch more, but they're both really great libraries. So there are some architectural options that you can build on top of this. If you're going to be building a few forms, probably just going with the form manager directly is fine. If you're going to be building a lot of forms where you have the same types of fields repeated in a lot of locations, I might consider going building a library of reusable form elements like our phone number field and our zip code field and a social security number field and all of that. And then you can reuse those across the app and you get consistent validation, localization, accessibility across all of those components, which is great. And then up at the tippy top, if you have a ton of forms, you're building an accounting application or whatever, you might consider building a meta forms management system. It's a lot of work, but the idea is that you would have a meta description of the form. These are the fields that I want. These are the validations that I want applied. And that Uber component would manage all the layout, all of the validation systems, all the rest of it for you. All you have to do is basically do a rough definition of the fields, and there you go. It's worth the investment if you've got a lot of forms. All right, well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, be sure to click on that like button. If you like these videos in general, be sure to hit that subscribe button, click that bell, and you'll be notified anytime a new video comes out. And in the meantime, please be happy, be healthy, be safe, stay indoors, and always ask, "Where's the pizza?"